let's move on to the culture blaster, Michael Snyder. He comes and goes on a rainbow. It is Michael Snyder, everybody. Yay!
Hey, I told you.
There's the
Oh, there
rainbow.
it is.
There it is. You got a
Oh my
Snyder.
God.
Whoop. That was a nice ride. Welcome
It's like
aboard.
Rainbow Interruptus. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, look, of course I listen to Jim and I listen to Michael every Friday before I do my segment. And it just made me think, I mean, it's horrible, as every member of the current administration is, as they lie, cheat, steal, and try to dismantle our democracy. They are to be admired for one thing, Kim. From orange-hued, combed-over top to sniveling bottom, they have the most punchable faces in the history of American government.
Talking about being a brawler. Of course, we don't advocate striking anyone, do we?
No, absolutely not. Let's get down to what's really important today. It's Mark's Madness, or as I like to call it, the madness of King Mark. I mean, I got my bracket in. It's looking good so far.
Okay.
I do want to say it's interesting that Mark isn't here for my segment today as Mark's Madness ramps up. And I know he had that procedure, and I hope he has a swift and total recovery. But I am betting he scheduled it so he wouldn't have to face my wrath. I mean, to be honest, I'm a little peeved that my immortal drop, another classic Mark Thompson time waster, isn't in the tournament this year.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and that's a really strong drop too. It's hard to believe it was left out.
Hey, neither of my other beloved drops are in either. Like, whoa, Mark, you're tripping, and my other favorite, must you keep hitting your dinger? Anyway, there's always next year.
You know what did make it in? I blame you.
I know, Kim. You are my number one, McAllister. I just want you to know.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Our love to Lucy as well.
Right.
Okay, so let's jump into these movies. There's a lot of them this week.
Yeah, we're going to try to get to as many as possible, but I want to actually concentrate at the top on the movie that's probably the biggest and perhaps most controversial release this weekend for something so simple and family-friendly as a live-action movie based on Walt Disney's groundbreaking late 1930s animated feature film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I have been fairly amused and slightly baffled by all of these controversies surrounding what has been titled Disney's Snow White, I guess, as opposed to someone else's Snow White. I don't know, the Brother Grimm's, for example.
It's all about marketing, Michael, right? You got to slap your name on there.
I know, the Grimm fairy tale is still the source, by the way. Anyway, regarding controversy, I actually expected to show up at the critics' screening and see three dueling demonstrations. The Snow White supremacists, who are offended that the title character is being played by Rachel Zegler, a talented singer and actress who is half Latin American, instead of someone, white as the driven snow. There's the anti-Israeli contingent that's offended by the ostensibly Zionist stance of evil queen actress Gal Gadot, who is, by the way, a native of Israel. And then there's the little people lobby. I think, they are offended by Disney going with actors enhanced by motion capture computer animation as the Seven Dwarves instead of casting little people. And this group has been led by their spokesperson, Peter Dinklage. And I really expect, oh my God, we're going to see like a Clash of the Titans at this screening. But no, instead of that kind of hysteria, I walked into the theater, it was quiet, and I watched what was a serviceable adaptation of the classic, which managed to produce a fairly faithful rendering of the original cartoon in live action form, and added some catchy new songs by the composing team that wrote the music for the Broadway hit, Dear Evan Hansen. Those songwriters, they kind of came through here, although I couldn't hum a single one of the songs now, a day or two later. That said, they kept a few of the most memorable numbers from the animated Snow White, which was smart. And Hi Ho and Whistle While You Work were there. You have to have them there. Yeah. They did replace I'm Wishing with a new wishing song that the Dear Evan Hansen guys wrote, and they pointedly dumped Someday My Prince Will Come, except as a melody on the soundtrack, since this revised Snow White does not need a prince to save her. The lack of
Oh.
consent. But there is still the lack of consent, true love's kiss. But she doesn't need a prince to save her. In fact, the 2025 Snow White makes Snow's goal not to be rescued and married off to a prince, but instead to be a good, kind, and just ruler like her parents, the king and queen of their realm. Of course, royal mom and dad are out of the picture shortly after they're introduced here. I think the queen dies of some illness. The king foolishly remarries, and wife number 2 is the evil queen, who, by the way, for those who don't know, is named Grimhilda. I don't know if they even use her name in this movie, or but that's her name from the Grimm's fairy tales.
And that's Gal Gadot, right?
Yeah, that's Gal Gadot. So the evil queen gets the king to go off into battle where he presumably dies. And as soon as her magic mirror tells her that stepdaughter Snow White, reduced to maid service in the castle, is more of a babe than she is, the evil queen enacts her reign of magical terror and condemns Snow White, the kingdom's rightful heir, to death at the hands of a huntsman who can't do the deed. I mean, you know the story. This is not spoiler territory. Everybody knows the story.
Right.
So to hide out, Snow shacks up with the dwarves in a platonic way. The evil queen disguises herself as an old hag who gets Snow to eat a poison apple, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. Okay. The movie does have a lovely introductory number with the king, queen, and young Snow White having this joyful street party with the commoners, you know. Snow White is more empowered and proactive than in the past, and she's aided in her quest to regain the kingdom, not by a prince, but by Jonathan, a charming rogue of a rebel, and his band of 7 comrades who live in the woods and plot against the queen, kind of like Robin Hood and his merry men. And then, of course, the dwarves. 7 rebels, 7 dwarves, 14 characters. Things are starting to get cluttered. By the way, it makes you wonder if the rebels were originally going to take the place of the CGI dwarves, but those dwarves are given a bit more texture in the script than you would expect by the screenwriter and playwright Erin Cressida Wilson, who she's got a pretty good track record. She wrote Secretary, which I've always enjoyed, the movie Secretary, and she's assisted, I think there was a little script doctoring by Greta Gerwig. In any case, there's a little wryness to this mild reinvention. Gadot is elegantly sinister in demeanor. The old hag makeup on her is amazing. The guy playing the rebel leader, Andrew Burnap, is cute. The dwarves are amusing, and the art direction is almost Wicked level. But it's Zegler who's the best thing about this. She played Maria in Spielberg's West Side Story remake, and she was fantastic. And she's pretty wonderful in the potentially thankless role of Snow White. Sweet, of nature and voice. I mean, she may look very much like the cartoon version, albeit with a light tan, but she's determined to make her kingdom and the world a better place. And I do want it to be noted before we move on that this is not so modernized that the dwarves greet Snow White by saying, "Hi ho." You know, it's just doesn't have that going on. It seems like it's trying to imbue the traditional tale with some contemporary sensibilities, and thus it occasionally feels neither here nor there, despite the efforts of director Mark Webb. This is the guy who did the absolutely adorable rom-com 500 Days of Summer and the amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield as Spidey. Disney seems to be determined to mine their intellectual property with live-action remakes and prequels to the animated gems in the vault. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Snow White is somewhere in the middle, and it should please families in search of wholesome entertainment. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I'll just close by saying that there is a fine line between timeless and tired. Snow White is in theaters.
Oh, no. I really love the live action remake of Beauty and the Beast. So
that was one of the good ones. I'm not going to argue. You know, let's be straight up about this. The Jungle Book with the live Mowgli in a CGI environment was fantastic, directed by Jon Favreau. Cruella, the prequel to 101 Dalmatians, was actually rather good. But, you know, the Cinderella, the Lion King prequel, I didn't like those very much. And this is like, again, right in the middle. Not terrible. Michael Snyder, The Mark Thompson Show. Put it on the poster.
You give it a not terrible. You give it a meh.
Give it a meh. Okay. The assessment is smart sci-fi minus a lot of tech trappings And it also has thought-provoking social commentary with some nasty, funny moments. And it's brilliantly performed by its three leads, Elizabeth Olsen, Himesh Patel, and Alicia Vikander. And a few significant supporting players, including Minnie Driver and Indira Varma, who are in one or two significant scenes. So Mia, played by Olsen, and Aryan, played by Patel, are would-be parents who live in a dystopian future where the more privileged members of the human race dwell somewhat comfortably in a climate-controlled environment and are only allowed to procreate with official approval of the state. That requires would-be parents like Mia and Aryan to undergo an assessment of their suitability to be parents by an assessor, here played by Vikander. And that assessor is sent to their home to observe them for a week. So the conflict between the put-upon couple seeking a child and the examiner searching for any reason to deny them is constantly compelling here. And the assessor is given what appears to be free rein in the examination, including all manner of questioning, role play, and tricks, which give the actors a veritable playground of situations to explore in their interactions. You know, the assessment echoes other science fictional tales in its investigation of governmental population control, but its intimacy and its cleverness and its cast elevated it. It's the first feature film directed by Fleur Fortune, and it bodes well for her future endeavors and for those of screenwriters John Donnelly and the screenwriting team of, and this is how they're billed, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas. Maybe the Thomases were denied a child by the assessor. I don't know. They turned to screenwriting. The assessment is in select theaters. I thought it was very good.
Oh, I like the idea of this because, you know, there's always those people, you think, you look at them and go, there really should be a test in order to have kids. There should be some kind of class that you need to take. It's harder to get a driver's license than it is to, to give birth to a human being, which you're responsible for guiding and making into this good person. And so maybe a class or some kind of, I don't know, training would be good. But the premise of the assessment is pretty scary.
Yeah, but it's beautifully done and very smart. They live kind of in a kind of a secluded cove area. And again, this whole world of the future is under a dome, and there are people living outside of this secure area. And that becomes a plot point as well. I think you're right about that, the parents test. It's just, I don't know. Look at what they're turning out. I mean, seriously, come on, people.
They gave me my baby to head home from the hospital, and I thought, really? You're trusting me? That's it?
Right.
I guess I'll figure this out.
I think you've done a good job so far, but okay. I like my movies lean and mean. And Locked fills the bill, if not the tank, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. It runs a tight 93 minutes. Locked is essentially a two-hander starring Bill Skarsgård of the Scandinavian acting family. His dad is Stellan, his brother is Alexander. And he played Pennywise in the It movies, as well as being the latest actor to play the title vigilante in The Crow. And Sir Anthony Hopkins of the British acting aristocracy, of so many notable credits, we don't have the time. So the action goes down primarily inside a luxury SUV that is actually a potentially deadly trap. Locked is based on 4x4, an Argentinian mix of thriller and horror that's set in Buenos Aires, but it works quite well in an American city. Skarsgård plays petty thief Eddie, whose marriage is in shambles, who has disappointed his young daughter, and who is desperate for money to try and make things right. So Eddie decides to break into a pristine parked SUV, finds the door unlocked, and gets inside to begin rooting around in search of valuables. So Eddie digs into the glove compartment, as one does, finds nothing, and tries to leave, but to his shock and distress, an auto lock has been engaged, and the doors and windows refuse to open, hence the terse and effective title, Locked. Although that could also refer to the lives we could be trapped in. So, not to spoil very much, this is again the setup. A phone in the dashboard rings. It's the owner of the car, a doctor named William, who is played by Hopkins. And apparently, William has been a victim of crime before. And in an attempt to visit justice upon any criminal who would try to take advantage of him again, has set up the customized car to ensnare any lowlifes who would see it as easy pickings. He informs Eddie he's being punished for his attempted theft, and things escalate from there. So Locked was directed by David Yarovsky, whose evil superpowered kid movie Brightburn was a twisted treat that I gobbled up, and the tidy script by Michael Ross cuts like a scalpel, and Skarsgård and Hopkins deliver the goods in what is a pretty modest product compared to other movies they've each done, but it's quite effective. And by the way, Locked was produced by Sam Raimi, who knows horror, although those aspects are toned down here. Locked is in theaters, and I recommend it.
Do you think this is this a horror movie?
It is a horror movie, but there's not a lot of blood and guts, but it's got pretty tense stuff. It's a thriller. It's a bit of a mystery, and it's got some horror elements, but they are nowhere near, the kind of gory displays that we were discussing last week with Novocaine and various other films.
Good to know.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, all righty. Let's talk about Odessa. Our pal Tim Sika reviewed it earlier. He covered it last Friday, I believe, on the After Party Live, but it didn't come out till this week. And hey, it's another dystopia. So Odessa, which is the first name of the movie's young heroine, is a rambling, folky, sci-fi musical drama romance. Could you combine more things here? It's set in a trashed future Western world, and it's got some decent folk and rock tunes and some very colorful and creative effects. And lead actress and veteran of Stranger Things, Sadie Sink, who plays Odessa, swims through it all unscathed. Odessa is a farm girl bequeathed a guitar by her ramblin' folky father. Imagine Pete Seeger as a wandering stranger in a strange land. And she is said to be the legendary seventh son, even though she's a daughter, destined to save society from itself, or more particularly from an evil evangelical leader who has hypnotized a doped-up world with his reality TV game show. Hey, sound familiar? Maybe just a little bit. The screenwriter and director Jeremy Jasper also participated in a lot of the what we would call the songwriting, I assume. And there's a good supporting cast. Kelvin Harrison Jr. plays Yuri Dervish, who is the love interest for her. Murray Bartlett from The White Lotus plays the evangelical leader Plutanovich, and Regina Hall plays one of his kind of hit women, Neon Dion. I thought it was decent, and it's actually on Hulu, so if you have Disney Plus, you can watch it.
You thought this one was decent. All right, that's okay. More than a meh. We'll take it.
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I thought it was ambitious and okay. Quickly, we'll try to zip through some of these, the detritus of the week. Ash is a science fiction movie about an astronaut who awakens, and she's on this kind of really dangerous seeming planet, and everybody in the space station where she's living seems to have been killed. And who was it? And suddenly a guy shows up, one of her fellow crewmen, and that might be the person responsible for all these deaths. And they start looking into what happened, and we don't know whether he's playing against her or she's, got weird hallucination or bizarre visions that have been kind of imbued in her by being in this alien environment. In space, no one can hear you say, "Hey, I think I saw this movie before." It's not bad, and it has this frenetic, kinetic visual style and banging soundtrack music, courtesy of the director Flying Lotus, who was a musician and actor as well. The actors, Isa Gonzalez as the woman and Aaron Paul of Breaking Bad and Westworld as the guy, are really good. And there's a lot of visual trickery. And I thought this was okay, but I thought it was the kind of okay where you would sort of maybe want to watch it at home when it gets to streaming. It's in theaters. It's not great, and it, again, recalls so many other classic films that maybe that works against it, but I didn't think it was bad. I do have another unrestrained recommendation for you, though.
That's another one of those. What Michael Snyder? It was fine. It was a meh.
It was no. Let me give you the good one. The good one I've been saving for the latter part of the segment. Misericordia is the movie, and tipping a cap or make that a beret to the film style the noirish film style that the French have always loved and adapted on their own. Misericordia goes to a small French village where Jeremy, played by Felix Kysel, a prodigal son of sorts, returns from his life in the city of Toulouse to his hometown in the southwesterly part of France to attend the funeral of a local baker who taught him the craft. So now he's out of work. So Jeremy considers staying around for a while when the baker's widow, played by the terrific French actress Catherine Frot, suggests he might take over her late husband's business. Although it seems as if the widow was a mother figure to Jeremy when he was growing up, there's a, how do I put this, a certain frisson to their post-funeral interactions. And that does not sit well with the baker's son, who admittedly was childhood pals with Jeremy, but they seemed to be rivals when they were kids. And I think that stuck with them into adulthood. As it happens, Jeremy is in no hurry to return to Toulouse. And to make matters more uncomfortable, he's sucking up to a couple other locals, including the local priest. It's all very disturbing thanks to Jeremy's enigmatic and somewhat surprising behavior. For anyone who likes the works and the films made from the novels of Patricia Highsmith, Jeremy could be Tom Ripley's French country cousin. So Misericordia is the latest from a very darkly thoughtful filmmaker, Alain Guiraudie, who made a similarly unsettling splash with the 2013 movie Stranger by the Lake. His measured direction and sneaky screenplay for Misericordia is at that level. And his cast, the creepy Kysel, the great character actress Frot, Jean-Baptiste Durand as the baker's son, and Jacques Debelle as the priest are in tune with the material. It's come for the wooded beauty of the autumnal French countryside, stay for the queasy goings-on, the slithery sex, and the shard of violence. Misericordia is in French with English subtitles. It is in select theaters.
And you recommend that one?
I do. I think it's pretty damn good.
And you have one more for us, or no?
Well, yeah, I think we should just talk a little bit about movies. I'm sorry. Let's talk a little about television for a second.
Please.
Yeah, I want to briefly make note of the current increase in global franchising. American television has a history of trying to remake series TV hits from the UK, right, with varying success. You've had Till Death Do Us Part, which became All in the Family. Steptoe and Son became Sanford and Son. Shameless became Shameless, etc. There have also been some high-end Scandinavian shows like The Killing and The Bridge that were adapted for the U.S. and England, where The Bridge became The Tunnel. And let's not forget The Office, which was a wildly successful sitcom here in the States, as everyone knows, that was spun off from its UK original. But The Office was so adaptable that versions in 11 other countries were made with what I assume was some degree of success. And I bring this up because, as I noted a couple Fridays ago, I'm watching the French series HPI. There are versions in 5 other countries, including the American interpretation, High Potential. HPI is available on Hulu right now in various versions. And now I see the same thing is happening with Ghosts. That's the British hit paranormal sitcom about a couple inheriting a once stately house, which is haunted by ghosts of different eras, and the wife has a head injury and she can see the ghosts while her husband can't. This became a ratings giant in its U.S. incarnation. It's on Thursday nights on CBS. At least 2 other versions have dropped. A German one called Ghosts DE, I guess meaning Deutschland, and now a French version called Ghosts Fantôme en Héritage, Inherited Ghosts. I looked at trailers for the German and the French versions, and damn, they duplicate so much of the UK and US versions with similar sorts of ghosts. There's always an early human, a priggish aristocratic lady, a military man from one era or another, and a scoutmaster, or in Germany, a sporty woman who died from an arrow in the neck. And to make matters crazier, the French comic actor Bruno Sanchez is a regular on both HPI and France's Ghosts, which, like its German counterpart, is not available to stream in the U.S. yet, unlike HPI, which you can watch on Hulu. I just think it's remarkable. We do live in a global society, and if there was ever an indication, it would be this.
Is this kid-friendly, Ghosts?
Yeah, if you haven't watched the American version, it's absolutely delightful.
Okay,
it's
wonderful.
Thursdays on CBS, and they always have sort of an interracial couple, which is, very 21st century at the heart of it. and you know, it's the German and French ones look good, you know, and again, HPI. You can watch it with subtitles or dubbed into English on Hulu, and
Mhm.
I kind of like it better than High Potential. But you know, that's only been one season here in the States, and HPI is up to its fourth. So anyway, I just wanted to like talk about it because I just find it
Yeah.
remarkable. This bizarre cultural expansion going on, you know, at least on the television front.
We're going to recap your movies, Michael Snyder. Snow White. It's a more empowered Snow White, you said. Same story. It's in the middle between what works and what doesn't. You didn't hate it and you didn't love it. The Assessment. You found it compelling. You really liked The Assessment. You say you recommend this one. Locked. Great script. You said it was great acting. The movie you called very effective, and you recommend Locked. Odessa. It's a musical. You said there's decent music and decent special effects in this one. You said it's decent and okay. Ash. You said it's not bad. You said it's a watch at home movie. If anything, that's Ash. And Misericordia, I mispronounced. You
Yeah.
said this is a great cast. You really like this movie. In French subtitles, you say it is recommended. As for streaming, you're recommending Ghosts. You said it's really good. So, and that's
Yeah,
on
well,
CBS.
yeah, it's been around for a while.
Mhm.
It's available for people to watch here in the States. And again, couldn't say more positive about HPI, the French version of High Potential. And I just been surprised when I saw they were dropping two more versions of Ghosts in other countries, and we had seen, you know, that happen with High Potential, or you know, its various offshoots. I just thought it was kind of fascinating to me. I don't know.
I'm excited to see this because I'm always looking for something I can watch with my 11-year-old. And there's, not always a lot of offerings. So thank you for recommending it. Michael Snyder,
Absolutely.
I appreciate you. Any sports related items before we send you off on your rainbow?
The Dubs have been fantastic. Love our Warriors. I heard Michael discussing the state of the changing roster in 49er land, and I'm watching that with some degree of interest and hope. And the Warriors are off on a road trip. Steph Curry banged his tailbone pretty seriously, so he's not going to be quite available at the top of the road trip, but they seem to be on a roll since Jimmy Butler was added to the team. And Butler returns to his former home in Miami to face off with the Heat as a Warrior. So that's kind of interesting this coming week. Other than that, it's always a pleasure, Kim.
Yeah.
And we'll hopefully see you next week.
Thank you, Michael Snyder. He comes and goes on a rainbow. Bye, Michael Snyder.
Farewell.
Farewell. Have a great weekend.